Welcome to the AI Accelerator Podcast, where we turn AI from a corporate buzzword into an unfair advantage. I'm Matt Zembruski, and this is the show for leaders who are done talking about AI and ready to execute. And today I'm joined by Dave Westgarth, who has a lot of experience in execution. So we're going to have a great conversation. And Dave, thank you very much for being here. I'll give a brief introduction to you and then let you elaborate on it in a second. So appreciate you being here, Dave. And Dave's the head of delivery at Unifeye. Dave brings deep hands-on experience across Agile delivery, project management, and technology, having worked in roles ranging from developer to manager across multiple industries. He's passionate and an advocate about Agile principles, works closely with delivery professionals, navigating real-world pressures of stakeholders' expectations, evolving tools like AI, and the constant demand to deliver results. Dave helps teams integrate AI into workflows in ways that save time, enhance impact, and improve outcomes. That's what everybody wants, right? Without compromising the Agile values along the way. So Dave, again, thank you. Welcome to the AI Accelerator Podcast.
No, thank you very much for having me, Matt, and thanks for the kind introduction. Really nice to be here and looking forward to the conversation because I know there's a lot of crossover between our backgrounds, which will be good to get into.
Yeah, a lot of it. And that's why I said about the delivery. Everyone's focused on delivery now. Agile was the real buzzword for the last 20 years, give or take. You and I have both been deep in that industry. And now delivery seems to be the hot thing, and AI, obviously. But as we get started, just share a little bit more about your background, how you got here, what you're passionate about, just so our audience gets to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've worked in the technology scene in the UK for just over 10 years now. And I started as a developer. What I did was I did a few jobs coming out of university, then went back and retrained in digital, found my way into a small local consultancy in the northeast of the UK. And from there, I went to public sector, working in government-related roles, went back out into a product-focused organization in the fashion industry, which wasn't what I expected coming into digital and technology, but that was a really nice wrinkle. And from there into a large multinational consultancy, and now working at Unifeye, as you mentioned, working primarily with Databricks as our data platform, data enabler for a lot of our customers and clients, and getting into the really, in my view, the three big hot topics in the industry now around data, cloud, and AI-related projects. That seems to be driving the industry more than anything else at the moment. And that's roughly, in a nutshell, been my career journey. Lots of interesting stuff before that, where I was delivering furniture and working in bars for years, but technology is where I am now.
Fantastic. Well, we'll focus on the technology for this conversation. I know that's what our audience is excited about. Well, offline, we'll talk about the furniture and the bars and stuff, because that sounds really exciting too. But you just shared about how AI has come into the mix now with data, with cloud, and with all this, and having a background in Agile delivery and delivery in general over the course of your technology career, and now you're seeing AI crash into the world, right? AI wasn't really part of the conversation 5 years ago. Yeah. In 2022, it sort of became mainstream with all natural language processing, with LLMs and these things. What's the biggest shift that you see coming along? Agile delivery, things are happening. All of a sudden, AI comes into the mix. What's the biggest change that you see, that how it's impacted teams and leaders and companies just over the last few years?
Yeah, there's lots of different ways. The excitement and sort of the tidal wave of enthusiasm for it is really the most encouraging part for me at the minute. Every organization and every exec is asking, how can we really use this to improve our results? And as you touched on, drive more positive outcomes for the business and the users and the customers. So the sort of appetite for getting cracking on it is really, really encouraging. And this sort of harkens back to the cloud transformation era, the Agile transformation era. I think in some ways it's a pattern we've seen before. What I'm seeing a bit more of, I wouldn't say it's enough yet, but what I'm seeing a bit more of is a really healthy level of pragmatism with it, though. I think a lot of companies have gone into Agile transformations, guns blazing previously, and similarly with cloud transformation. What I'm seeing in the data and AI transformation is really making it stand up to scrutiny, maybe really making it stand on its own 2 feet. And what we talk about with a lot of our customers at the moment is getting out of the prototyping trap with AI. There's a really easy way in where anyone can really pick it up and try and play around with these tools. And it's very easy to come up with a POC or an example. But then how do you harden that? How do you professionalize that? How do you get it ready for production grade systems and things like that? That's the immediate challenge I see, and that's the one that we are really trying to help our customers out with the most at the moment, I would say.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And that is, there's multiple levels to it, right? You sort of sprinkle a little AI in, it starts to work with the workforce, with people, starting to solve problems, then hardening it, getting things production ready, especially on the technology side with systems. That's such an important topic. Dave, if my research serves me correctly, you gave a talk, which I didn't see yet, but called AI powered Agile.
Yes.
Those are two words together in one talk, which is exciting. And for a company that's more mid-sized, say 50 to 500 employees, like a mid-sized organization, UK, US, wherever, let's say there's one of these companies mid-sized, they haven't really adopted much AI yet. They're not sure what to do. They haven't really dove into the pool yet on AI. What's the first practical thing that you think they should do?
This is a really interesting question. And as you talk about injecting AI into your delivery patterns, I think one really good thing that a lot of companies could do is look at their existing ways of working and think about not just how can we get AI in here by hook or by crook, but how can we intelligently design effective AI interfaces into our existing ways of working. And I talk about this a lot with Scrum, especially in things like retrospectives, for example, where we would get the team together to think about what's good, what's bad, what do we want to change. That's a really easy way, an easy segue to bring in AI-powered tools as well. If you're working with AI development tools, if you're working with prompt-to-product tools, or even just base LLMs, you can bring those tools into that discussion as well. It's important to remember that they're not perfect oracles and they are biased in several different ways that maybe we can get into in this conversation. But also bringing AI-powered tooling into those retrospective discussions can inject different perspectives and different ideas to those discussions that teams and organizations can then use to drive improvements at the team and organizational level. So thinking very clearly about what we do right now, what's good and bad about it, and then how can we inject AI to either amplify what's good or help us mitigate what's bad is a really good starter for 10, I think.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So these are technical teams that you're talking about, right? Or delivery teams, I'm guessing.
Yeah, normally technical delivery. Yeah.
Yeah, because it depends on how much. I guess the technical, the IT part of the organization, the technical, the delivery side of the organization, tend to be the ones who can consume the AI the easiest because they understand it because it's a technology. It's another technology to assimilate, right? Okay, we have software. We're going to write software now, get good at development. We're going to get good at delivery and all that stuff. And now the AI is here. It's like, okay, we can assimilate that. Because I think about the capability of the people to do that. Because the non-technical staff in the organization sometimes struggles with it a little bit because it can be a little bit more of an odd technology that now can apply more cross organization versus just in the tech space. So let's say you're working with an organization and they're starting to adopt it and they're starting to roll in that direction, just as you shared, and they're starting to understand, okay, we're an Agile Scrum team moving along and we think we can get better in this particular area. So how can we incorporate AI in that area to accelerate our improvement in that area? I want a two-part question. Number one, are there any creative ways that you've seen to measure the success of AI adoption or incorporating AI into continuous improvement activity or any type of AI transformation activity that's going on? So two-part question is any type of measurement practices or tools that you'd recommend there to sort of measure the effectiveness of the AI integration and solution. And then also the second part of it is like, what have you seen more from a human side of AI perspective? What have you seen have you seen any resistance or anything that surprises you about the way the people on these technical delivery teams are integrating with AI and starting to learn it?
These are two really good questions. So I'll start with the metrics and measures one first. As an Agilist, typically we love metrics and putting measurements around delivery. And I know velocity's fallen out of favor, but that's normally a starter for 10 for a lot of people. But even looking beyond velocity and story points, when we think about the the core sort of suites of metrics that we know and love. If we think about things like flow metrics from Kanban, if we think about things like the DORA metrics, even the space metrics that are sort of a sister suite to DORA, these are really good measurements pre-AI, I would say. The thing I can see coming over the horizon now is AI is going to accelerate these metrics in a way that makes them far less meaningful than they are right now. And I'll just talk through a couple of examples. Let's think about cycle time from the Kanban flow metrics, where we're tracking how long it takes an individual piece of work to get from start to finish in our value delivery system. If we inject AI into the mix, then AI can reliably cover that task from end to end. The cycle time for that could be a matter of seconds now, instead of measuring days. So that acceleration, while in the immediate term is amazing and mind-blowing, over time, your cycle time, instead of being 3 to 4 days, you could be looking at differences between 11 and 15 seconds. So the typical sort of lines in the sand, or the typical yardsticks that we've used to measure delivery health and delivery effectiveness, our relationship with them is going to have to change and evolve in some ways. The other part on the measures and metrics, though, I think the beauty of these delivery metrics and the beauty of delivery being accelerated in this way means that it's much easier for teams to tie their individual efforts back up to organizational level goals. And a suite of metrics I really like come from evidence-based management from scrum.org, where we talk about managing product in line with strategic goals of an organization. And we talk about things like the current value a product provides, the unrealized value that we may be able to capture, the time it takes us to get that product into market, and the ability to innovate on that product. And I think thinking of it at that level, instead of the individual team's delivery metrics, thinking about it at the product and organizational strategic level, is a much more reliable gauge for how your AI adoption and your AI tooling is helping you moving forward. Does that make sense, I suppose? Because I know I've hit you with a lot of technical know-how there that I'm assuming people know about, but is that a good sort of starter for 10?
Yeah, thank you, David. It makes a lot of sense and I know I'll let you comment on the mindset or the human side of the adoption next. But from a metrics perspective, you shared a really key insight that when a metric goes from 2 to 3 days to seconds or minutes, it sort of becomes unreliable for the team to actually look for continuous improvement in that particular area now. So I think that's a really key insight. Hopefully our audience that are on delivery teams or managed delivery teams, hopefully they got that, because they need to sort of take a step back, as you're saying, and reassess what metrics do they really want to measure the team's success on, and what ones need to go by the wayside, because now we're measuring other factors and so forth. So that was very helpful.
Yeah, it applies across so many. You can even think of metrics like mean time to recovery from DORA. If we've got AI agents that are self-healing and remediating systems that they work on automatically, that mean time to recovery, instead of being hours-long interventions on P1 defects, if those are now being resolved in microseconds as agents get on them and fix them immediately, how reliable is this gauge in terms of the overall health of your delivery if we can just sort of take for granted that this is going to be good? And this sort of comes into another thing that I've been thinking about, how vibe coding and these tools are going to revolutionize things like lean UX, because now the price of experimentation and taking swings at problems is so cheap because development's become so democratized and cheap. There's really no excuse now not to be running multiple experiments on your product all the time, and probing your user base to figure out what works, and then evolve and continue to have that experimentation feedback loop in place, because the price for doing it now doesn't rely on heavy duty teams where you need engineering capacity anymore. A product manager on their own can deploy a tool like Lovable against this and get that going within minutes on their own.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. Let's talk about that as well, because that's an organizational dynamic that you just, again, started to crack open the conversation on, regarding like product managers and some of the maybe lesser technical development professionals, right? Not typically involved in the delivery of the production of the delivery software and things like that. Now are more empowered with AI tools and so forth. But also it shifts the market, because it shifts the dynamic, because now there's also there's more reliance on the humans, whether a product manager or team member, to do more of the critical thinking and strategic planning around what's being happened with the tools. So you may not be as much hand to keyboard with doing the actual development, But so talk a little bit about how I guess how the mindset changes need to happen, because there's like, what have you seen out there in terms of product management, delivery teams, and so forth? If they're doing less of the hands-on development, how do they sort of accelerate, and are they doing more strategic, critical thinking? What are some other things that they're more involved with? Are they taking on twice as much work, right? And what have you seen out there?
Yeah, there's lots of good stuff I can get into there, and a couple that stand out. I think the major change I'm seeing is now, instead of teams being given, this is in more of the progressive organizations that I've seen really adopt these AI tools and take them into their core ways of working. You'll see developers and development teams now who aren't working on individual tickets anymore. They'll be working on either experimentations or learning cycles. They'll be given a problem that the business has got, or a problem that the user base and the product has got, and they've got a much broader spectrum of availability to them to go and solve that problem now. Instead of the ticket saying something like, we need to upgrade our database to this version to remain in line with XYZ, we can now say, we have this particular problem for this particular segment of our user base. Can you go and solve that problem? There's so much more latitude and breadth available to these developers now, because the engine for value now is how quickly you can learn. The delivery element is becoming less and less of a differentiator. And I'm firmly in the camp of delivery is the first problem that you should be solving. In my view, if you're not delivering, there's not a bigger problem that you can be solving as an agilist and a delivery professional. But once that's in place, you need to then think about, okay, what does really good delivery look like now? And how do we go from good to great delivery? And using these AI-powered tools to accelerate the feedback loops, accelerate your opportunities to learn, and increase the surface area for you to run into customers and learn more about them, is really where a lot of organizations are seeing a lot of joy with these tools. The important caveat I have to drop in at this point, though, is although they're really good at getting up and running with prototypes, toy applications, experiments in front of your users, there's still a long way to go before I would trust them with production grade applications and production grade solutions. And there's two really big strands to this. Number one is when we work in a team, we typically have some level of coding standards or coding agreements or architecture principles that we'll all adhere to. A, because we think they're good principles, but B, it makes it easier to work on a code base and a product together as a team. These AI-powered tools are terrible at that. They're very good at making very messy and spaghetti code that's very hard to maintain and work on. But the second part is around things like the non-functional requirements that come with it: robustness, scalability, security. And I was talking to a non-technical user not long ago about the security constraint, especially, and saying, although you can now vibe code an application on your own, it's not truly a production-ready application for things like security constraints. Mm. And he came back to me saying, well, I'll just ask the machine, I'll just prompt the tool to make it secure. And that's not going to be enough. That will not make it a secure application. So I think although these tools are great and they're a bit revolutionary in terms of the democratization of digital skills, there's still really a lot of that risks and mitigations that need to be, I don't want to use the word education, but there's an education piece within a lot of these organizations to say, although this gets you a few steps forward, it's by no means getting you to the finish line of those digital product delivery cycles. And there's still a real need for true professional software craftsmen to come in and apply those really robust patterns around things like security, scalability, maintainability, and technical level agility, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's another really good point. And I saw a recent, you're familiar with the company Anthropic with Claude, obviously, and so forth. And I saw an interview on YouTube recently where the Dario Amodei, the CEO there, was trying to dispel the myth of, okay, AI is going to come in and replace all the software engineers. And once AI is good enough to do software development, then we don't need the people anymore. This whole myth that's out there in the news and media and so forth, which is not true. So Claude, or Anthropic, in the interview he said, listen, we're using AI to generate 90%. We're using our own Claude code to generate 90% of our software development. But it doesn't mean we're letting any people go. We're literally, the software engineers now are just learning how to manage larger bodies of code, and they're being more strategic about what they're doing. And it puts even more opportunity for these software engineers to level up their learning and skills. So I thought that was a fascinating comment, which relates to what you're saying, is that there's a lot to do. I often say AI is not an easy button. You don't just drop it in and step back and it just does everything for you.
Yeah, and that's a really good segue into the second part of the question that you originally asked. I'll come back to that now, because I've described what I call Parkinson's Law 2.0 that AI is bringing in, but I'm assuming you know what Parkinson's Law is before I go forward.
Yeah, but explain it to our audience, just because maybe not everyone may not have the same Agile background.
So Parkinson's Law, for anyone that works in delivery, you'll know this. It's that work grows to fill the time that's allotted to it. And this is typically when you've got an individual task. If I give you a week to get that done, magically it will take a week to get done, although you may have been able to get it done in 15 minutes. And Parkinson's Law 2.0, which is powered by these AI tools, is a very similar sort of thing. So on the one hand, you may think, okay, I've got a week's worth of work now, but if I bring in some AI tools, I can get that week's worth of work done in 2-3 days, which gives me another 2 days to, as you talk about, do more strategic things, do more L&D, get involved in other bits and pieces. What I think we're seeing more and more of, though, is that space that's become available is now just being filled up with more work, and there's more and more expected of people. As these AI tools allow you to become a more powerful and more efficient individual contributor, your workload seems to be going up in tandem with that. And I think this is getting a little bit societal level now, I suppose, but I think that's another thing that a lot of, especially professionals working in digital, where these AI tools are thriving, really need to be alive to that threat and the risks of things like burnout and being overwhelmed by the work that now is suddenly appearing on your plate that maybe 2 or 3 years ago would have been a bit of a pipe dream.
Yeah, it's fascinating. If we want to, let's bubble it up to the macro side, because I have a curious question to ask you, something that I've seen in the States a bit, and I'm just curious if you're seeing it in other parts of the world and so forth. But for companies that, because we talk about AI, okay, AI comes in, there's an acceleration. As the AI transformation happens, as you're explaining, there's an acceleration of the team. So let's just say they're going twice as fast. Now you can get twice as much done. And in the beginning, you have plenty of a backlog of work, and you're going out there, and the teams accelerate. But in fairly short order, call it months, but in fairly short order, the executives or the leadership of the company, the strategic visionaries who are driving the entire ship of the company, I think have a decision to make. They have to say, okay, are we going to grow faster than we were planning to grow pre-AI adoption, or are we going to okay, we're going to grow by 10% this year? If you're speeding up by 50% with your delivery and you're only planning to grow by 10% before your AI adoption, now you have to make a decision. Are we going to go bump this number up? What have you seen there as far as leadership's impact? Are they starting to think about this from a more of a okay, we need to be more aggressive about what we're going after in the market because we can be more competitive, and we need to change our goals that we're going after. I know the burnout side is another important thing. It's not sustainable forever at just this go forward faster pace. But I'm just curious, from a leadership perspective, what have you seen out there? Have you seen companies reassessing what they're going to go after, or going after higher growth goals and things like that?
We've seen similar patterns in the UK where I'm based, and there's been a recalibration, I would say, in terms of leadership expectations of what they can reasonably get done within a financial year, within a quarter, with these AI-powered tools coming in to accelerate the capabilities of the teams, which is really good. The thing that's starting to emerge now, and this is right at the start of the curve, I wouldn't say that this is reliable, though. The word that a lot of people are now concentrating on is consolidating that growth, because there's a lot of companies now that are really spoiled for choice in terms of the firepower that they have to get delivery done. And they're sort of getting out over their skis slightly now, where they're falling in love with that speed. And now they're at the point where they're starting to go fast for the sake of going fast now. And the application of that speed is not being as well thought through as maybe it should have been in some cases. The speed is great, but the speed in and of itself is not a natural good. And again, I think that recalibration on, okay, we can go really fast, let's go fast, is now saying, okay, maybe not quite that fast. And the sort of settling back down now to where we think a reasonable expectation looks like, I think.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You're seeing the same thing. I think it's interesting how fast the assessment of, or the pivoting that's required for everybody involved in the organization based on this major change factor. Like when the pandemic hit, it was a massive dose of change for the entire world. And, what do we do? How do we adapt to it? What do we do? And I think AI, I would say, is significantly bigger than this, but it's not, you can keep it at bay by keeping your door shut and saying, all right, we're not going to quite go with AI adoption yet. Let's wait and let's see what other people are doing first. We're still sort of in that sort of watch and see place. I mean, when COVID hit, it hit and it was boom, it was everywhere. There wasn't really a choice. But this is a bigger wave, in my opinion, significantly bigger wave of change. But there's an ability or an opportunity now. Maybe it's not an opportunity. Maybe it's a lack of opportunity if people are deferring the decision, to get involved. So I just wanted to say that to segue into a question. Other than what we've just discussed, what do you see out there that is not working in terms of AI adoption or in this? Like what I just shared was more of like, all right, just wait around until everybody else figures it out and then dive in. I think that's not, for obvious reasons, that's not a good choice right now. What have you seen out there that where organizations are stumbling a little bit, or maybe a team stumbling a little bit?
So I think again, there's a few things, but just to jump onto your point before we move off it, I think not only is this a bigger wave, I think it's a far more sustained wave. And especially when you look at things like the tooling that's coming off the line, just as you start to understand the tools that have come out, new tools come in. And it's not only are new tools coming in that are better in that specific context. When you think about an LLM that improves, where we go from GPT-4 to 4.1 to 5, there's the wrappers and the applications of those tools across a broad spectrum of use cases that you also now need to keep up with. And I think this ties in directly to your point around let's wait and see. And then when good practice emerges, we'll adopt that. That good practice is not going to emerge for a long time based on what we're seeing. And I think that's why organizations now really need to take that jump and think we need to come at this with more of an experimentation mindset and really turn ourselves into a learning organization that's prepared to probe and experiment all the time. And that seems to be the only way to really make a success of this. Just accept that there's going to be some level of discomfort and failure along the way. But unless we really jump in with both feet and start experimenting in a meaningful way, we're not going to be able to capture that value before the environment shifts again. That's one. The other one I see that I think, again, a bit like agility, where people try to plug agility in, flip the switch on and things will handle themselves. We're seeing similar patterns with AI tools where organizations, I think a lot of them are taking either enterprise ChatGPT or Claude subscriptions, dumping it on the teams and saying, okay, make it work from there. And that's not, although I think tool availability is a good thing generally, that is not enough to create a sustainable and value-driven AI transformation or an AI experimentation mindset within your teams. I think alongside giving the teams access to the tools and the products that you think will help them get across the line, framing the availability of those within the problems that you want them to solve or the parameters that you want them to use those tools within is also really helpful, because not only does that give your teams and your professional individual contributors a bit of direction in terms of what you'd like to see, as an organization, it makes it easier for you to understand, okay, are we moving in the right direction here or are we not, based on what we thought that these tools would do for us.
Yeah, those are very good points. And to that point, I know that you've created a 6-week AI learning plan that you've offered out there for professionals. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that starts to sort of solve that? Like, to give, it's not just here's a bunch of tools, good luck, but it's more of like you've created this course, I'm assuming out of necessity, to help close some of that gap. Can you share a little bit more about what that is and sort of how teams can benefit from it?
Yeah, so when these tools really first popped, as I said, there was a lot of excitement and everyone wanting to get stuck in. But a lot of what I would consider, and I think what a lot of people would consider now, the foundational concepts around AI, like how an LLM really works, how these solutions really fit together, how you can use them effectively, was still a little bit ethereal at that point. It was very much people doing things that they thought were working for them, but no real codified approach to this is how to use AI effectively for the specific problems that you want to solve. So what I've done, you're right, I started with an AI learning plan that brought together 6 AI-based credentials that I'd gone through myself and thought were really good. But that's actually grown since then. I've now got 3 learning plans, and each of them have a little bit of a different flavor. The first one was very much for non-technical users. So this is for users who are using tools for the first time. Maybe they aren't technology professionals, and they can get a little bit of a, not necessarily a technical understanding, but they're going to understand behind the scenes, at least conceptually, how these tools fit together and what they're actually doing when you ask them a question, which is really good. The second AI track is for slightly more technical users, and this uses courses that are mainly for technology professionals who plan to use these in coding type workflows, I suppose. And again, it's about being able to use the right tool in the right environment. And I don't know how technical your listener base is, but tools like Claude Code, for example, really sing within the CLI, and other tools really sing within the IDE. You can think of tools like Cursor, being able to know which tool to use for the problem that you're trying to solve in the paradigm that you're trying to solve it is really good. And the third one, the most recent one I've done, is one on Agentic AI. And I've been pleasantly surprised how accessible Agentic AI has become for everyone, especially with tools like Azure Foundry, which is Microsoft's birthplace for agents, which is being made freely available, and non-technical users really can get cracking there really quickly. So those are my 3 learning plans. They're typically made up of 6 credentials that are free and self-paced. So the barrier for entry here is incredibly low. It's just about having some time and sitting through the material and then going away and applying it yourself. And I'm hoping that this will act as almost a bit of a shot in the arm or a catalyst for people to really start their own learning journey. Because although it's great to understand these tools conceptually at high level and quite broadly, you're going to get the most value out of them by customizing them and tailoring them to your specific problems that you're trying to solve. And the sooner you can get the foundational knowledge in place that you need to start tailoring them, the better. And then obviously go into apply territory from there.
Yeah, I fully agree with what you're sharing about that, Dave, because it's so important for, again, AI is not an easy button. You don't just drop it in and it all of a sudden makes everything work faster. You have the humans plus AI together. So how does that blend happen? And what you're just talking about is the learning journey that the people, the humans, need to go on as part of this. And again, the tool itself does not help you with that learning journey. I mean, it can a little bit, but not really. So that's why you created the courses. I'd love to, if you can provide those after. I'd love to provide a link to those in the show notes for everybody, because those sound fantastic. And as we're wrapping up here, Dave, I like to ask this question: if you were to wave a magic wand, right, across industry and change one thing about how organizations approach AI right now, what would it be?
Oh, I'm spoiled for choice here. I'll try and distill it down. So I get quite a bit of heat on LinkedIn for suggesting that Scrum Masters especially, but in my view, everyone working in technology delivery should have some level of technical knowledge. I know not everyone agrees with that, but for the purpose of AI, I think having a really foundational technical understanding of how a tool like an LLM works is really good in a lot of ways. Number one, it makes you a more effective operator of this tool. If you can understand how it works, you understand how to make your inputs more efficient and get closer to the outputs that you want. But number two, the latent anxiety and fear around, is AI going to take all of our jobs? Will I have a job in 5 years' time if AI keeps improving? If you develop that technical understanding, especially of how LLMs actually work and what they're really doing underneath the hood, a lot of that latent fear will evaporate. These tools aren't intelligent in the way that you probably think they are if you don't know how they work technically behind the scenes. And understanding that layer will make it not only a lot easier for you to hook into AI and get started with it, but also understand how you can use it to improve your own performance and accentuate the bits that AI can't do right now, and based on current architecture and current design is probably never going to be able to do reliably. So it's a really good way for you to sort of continue to refine and chisel away at what your value proposition is as a professional and how you can turn that into career longevity moving forward. Does that make sense, I suppose? Because I know I've given a bit of word soup there.
Yeah, it does. It makes a lot of sense. And I think what what you're sharing is just the blend of how the human transforms along with the AI technical transformation in the organization. And to put a little point on what you just shared, you talked about understanding the technology, have a technical understanding of the LLMs and the AI infrastructure and so forth. But I think what you've also implied there is that that's for technical and non-technical professionals, right? For anybody going through, because it is, even if you're non-technical, in other words, even if you're non-technical, you're not closed out from the opportunity to contribute to the AI transformation in your organization, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the hyperscalers, especially when I think of AWS, Azure, and GCP, are tremendous at creating non-technical, entry-level, foundational material that makes all of these concepts and highly technical solutions accessible to the layperson. So if you are listening to this as a non-technical person, please do not think that there are barriers in your way and locked doors going to keep you out. The barrier for entry on this has never been lower, and the barrier to learn more about this and really build on that technical knowledge, it's never been easier. For me at this point, there's no real excuse other than not having the time available to go and really develop your knowledge and your skills in these areas.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. This is so amazing, Dave. I'm so glad that you were able to be here on the podcast today. Really appreciate your time, your insights, all the value that you've delivered here in the course of our conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me, Matt. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks very much.